This review has been made possible by Toyota of Naperville. As you know, Toyota has tons of brand new Toyotas available for purchase. But did you know that they also have a remarkable selection of used cars? Head on over to toyotaofnaperville.com and look through hundreds of used cars for sale right now. Alright, what's up guys? My name is Zach and today I am driving a 2017 Mazda 3 sedan. Up front is a 2.0 liter inline 4 and down below is a 6-speed automatic transmission. This video is sponsored by CarMarshal.com. If you'd like to support the channel, click the link down in the description below. CarMarshal.com advertises for over 100,000 vehicles across the US. But let's get back to that 2.0 liter inline 4. Well, it's one of two engines offered here in the Mazda 3. There's either the 2.0 liter, which is what this is, or you could get a larger 2.5 liter. Now, the 2.5 liter, I've reviewed a lot of cars on the channel with. My own family has a 2018 Mazda CX-5, and I'll be referencing that probably a lot throughout this video, and that has the 2.5 liter as well. So let's get this thing warmed up, let's get it on the test track, and we'll see what the 2.0 liter can do. All right, the car is up to temperature, everything is warm. We will put it into sport mode. Let me turn off the air conditioning so you can kind of hear it better. I'll do a little bit of window down. 2.0 liter, 6-speed auto, Mazda 3. Yeah, so it doesn't knock your socks off, obviously. I mean, it definitely gets up to speed. And honestly, what it feels like is we have that Mazda CX-5 with the bigger motor at home, but it feels the same because the CX-5 is so much heavier than this. It honestly feels like the same amount of acceleration, which is good. It has a good amount of acceleration for a little car like this. Now, the hatchback that I drove, I did drive a 2018 hatchback that I'll link at the end of the video. That had the 2.5 liter, and that was starting to get into the territory of, oh, I might get in trouble. So if you're going to buy this for your kid, or if speed doesn't matter, you want to get a little bit better gas mileage. I think the average, what was it telling me on here? My average MPG is 34.0. I mean, if you want to push that, you don't really care about straight line speed, you don't need that extra power, go with the 2 liter. It still feels great. It doesn't feel sluggish. It doesn't feel like you have to beat it with a wiffle ball bat to get it to do anything. It just works, and that's all you need it to do. One thing I don't like about the engine is the fact that on cold starts, it's pretty noisy. It quiets down pretty quick, and it's not the exhaust, it's the actual engine itself. I have the same issue with the 2.5 liter in our Mazda CX-5. This isn't a one-time issue. It's not like I started this car this morning and it was loud, so I was like, oh, I gotta let them know about that. I've seen this in a lot of other modern Mazdas when they cold start. Don't be alarmed if they do sound a little off when they're cold. Now, like I said, paired to it is a 6-speed automatic transmission. This is pretty much the bread and butter of Mazda. They use it in every single front-wheel drive application. It's a really, really nice transmission. I've never had an issue with it. Like I mentioned, we've never had issues with Mazda transmissions. And so really on that front, that's all I can really say about it. It's a good quality transmission. And I do have sport mode, which deals a lot with the transmission, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. Last but not least, of course, the Mazda 3 is front-wheel drive. Although in 2019 they started offering an all-wheel drive model, this is the front-wheel drive version. So let's talk about the interior. Well, in front of me, I sort of have 3 main gauge pods. In the center, I do have my speedometer, nice and prominent in the middle. I like that a lot. Then on the left, I do have my tachometer. Now, it is a digital tachometer, which is pretty interesting, and I've always sort of wondered why they make the tachometer circular when it doesn't really fit properly in the gauge pod. The actual gauge pod is square, or more rectangular, I guess. It's a quadrilateral, but they still make the RPMs circular, so I feel like it's not the most spatially efficient, but that's okay. And then on the right, I have my outside temperature, average miles per hour and my fuel, but we can easily change that to my fuel range, my average MPG, my current MPG, then we're back to average speed. I like the gauge cluster. It's very clean and simple, and I like that a lot. One thing I don't like about the gauge cluster is that I don't actually get a coolant gauge. Lower trim Mazdas don't do this anymore. Like this Mazda 3, I don't actually get a coolant gauge. However, I do get a light that'll tell me when the car is too cold, but that's it. I don't really get a light otherwise. On the steering wheel, on the left, we have our info, volume up and down, voice controls, and phone controls. And then on the right, we have our cruise control options. This car does not have radar cruise control. So if you'll notice at the front of the vehicle, there is a completely normal Mazda badge as opposed to the radar Mazda badge, which looks slightly different. That's how you can tell if a car has radar cruise control. To the left, I just have my traction control off and my tire monitoring system button, which is really nice. If you do get a flat tire or get your tires changed, odds are you're gonna have to get familiar with that button because that's how you reset it. And the reason I mention that should be standard for all cars, but my friend actually has a Mazda 3, and so I had to walk her through that process. On the door, we just have our power mirrors, power locks, and power windows. Only the driver's window is one touch down, one touch back up. The rest are not, but that's totally fine. Then we come to the center screen. I have a very, very much love-hate relationship with this center screen. The love part is the fact that I think that it's easy to use. It's easy for other people to use. It's very intuitive. It's not hard to get used to. I think it's laid out really well, and it has a lot of key features. That's all good and dandy. There's just some slight stuff that I don't really like. On first startup, it is a little bit laggy, and that's sort of annoying. In my own personal experience, I'll get in the car, plug in my phone, and then I'm waiting 20, 30 seconds until my music actually starts playing. This is very much a first world problem, I recognize, but it's a little bit annoying at times. I also don't like the navigation system given in Mazdas. But we don't have to worry about that because this car is not actually outfitted with navigation, but this raises a different issue. Mazda is so kind as to give you your latitude, your longitude, your elevation, and a compass, but no map. So if you don't buy the navigation package, they will give you everything you need to know, your latitude, your longitude, what elevation you're at, and even a compass, but they will not tell you where you are in the world. And I honestly, genuinely feel like that's just to punish the poor. If you can't afford it, we'll give you everything for it, except for the final key factor. We'll give you 95% of the required information, just not that final one. And that is annoying. At the end of the day, I do like the infotainment center. My friend Rod always gives me trouble because I rip on these things so hard, but it's all out of love. You know, your closest friends are your meanest friends, and obviously I'm a huge Mazda fan. I've owned 3 RX-7s. I'm a big fan of the brand. I know Mazda can do better. And honestly, newer models are offered with Apple CarPlay, and that solves literally all of your issues. Any issue you have with this is solved with Apple CarPlay. And so I can't really knock this thing too hard. Down below that, we do have 2 vents in the middle, pretty standard. And then we have our climate controls as well as heated seat options, which is really interesting. This seems a lot like a sort of base model Mazda 3, but it does have heated seats, which I am very pleasantly enjoying. Mazda heated seats always do a great job. I've never been in a Mazda with heated seats that weren't spectacular. But the climate controls are nice and clean. They're easy to use, easy to see, and I like that a lot. Then I do have a USB port, aux input, and my SD card if I would like to ever load the maps, and just a little pad to put things. And then we come to the shifter. Now, I like the shifter a lot. I think it has great feedback. When you put it into park, it feels like you're in park. It has a good solid clunk to it. And I mean that in a positive way. It's a positive clunk. It's real satisfying when you move it. I like that a lot. It's really easy to move as well. But to the left of that, we have our sport button. So we can toggle it up into sport, or that's it. We don't have an eco mode. We just have a sport mode. And now, I mentioned previously we were going to talk about it. What sport mode is is it really just kind of sharpens up your shift points with the transmission. So when you floor it, it'll hold onto a gear longer and higher up into the revs so you get more power. That's really all sport mode does. It doesn't adjust the suspension. It doesn't unlock some secret turbo. It's just better shifting is really what it is at the end of the day. Then down at the bottom, we do have a bunch of interesting things. We'll go left to right. We do have our power parking brake, which I'm not the biggest fan of, but in automatic, you don't really need it. Now, there is a blank switch below it. This would be for the auto holding brakes, but this car does not have that. Then going to the right, we have our selector dial for the center screen. I genuinely believe that this is probably the best in its class feeling-wise. It has great tactile feedback. I know exactly what I'm doing without looking. It's very satisfying, and I like that a lot. I don't think it's the best ever, but honestly, the only company that really rivals it with being as good is some of the BMWs. And I mean, that's pretty high praise for a Mazda to be as good of, if not better than a BMW. That's pretty high praise in my book. Now, like I said, the seats are heated. My driver's seat is power, but they are not memory. Mazda is very, very reluctant to give cars memory seats. I recently drove a 2019 CX-5 Grand Touring Reserve. That finally had memory seats. I feel like someone had to really bully Mazda into giving a car memory seats because you just don't see it that often. And obviously, this is another case of that. You don't get them in here. But they're nice and comfortable, and we will do a back seat review as well. All right, so we are in the back of the 2017 Mazda 3, and it's a little cramped. I have to spread my legs in order to fit them around the seat. This is my driving position. I'm a little smashed up against the center console here. Obviously, the center console does go up. Before we do that, 2 cup holders. That's nice, but not very big back seats. A little bit crammed back here. Headroom is good. It's better in the hatchback. So if rear headroom is a must, the hatchback will offer more of that. However, it's not bad here in the sedan. It's a decent space. I'm not loving it back here. This is where it kind of feels like an economy car. And that can't be said about the rest of the car. I think the rest of the car actually feels a lot nicer. But this is sort of where it's like, oh, they kind of didn't really think about the back seat, huh? Overall, I like the interior. I think the rear kind of lacks a little bit of headroom because I drove a hatchback last year, a 2018 hatchback. I think it's just hard to compete with that longer, flat roof line. Now we got to talk about looks. I think it looks pretty good. You have to remember the Mazda 3 was actually redesigned for 2019, so this is now considered the older body style. I still think it looks good. I think the hatch looks better, but that's my own personal opinion. I actually think the redesigned sedan looks better than the redesigned hatch, but that's for whenever I review one of those. I think it's a solid looking sedan. I don't think it brags more than it can put out. It doesn't bark more than it can bite. And it doesn't bite off more than it can chew. It's just a decent looking little sedan, and that's all I can really say. What you have to remember about this era of Mazda is this is just after Mazda's split with Ford. If you guys didn't know, Ford had a controlling share in Mazda since really the 70s. I mean, we saw the Mazda Repu, the rotary engine pickup truck, was the same as a Ford Courier. More obviously in the late 90s, early 2000s, the Ford Escape was the Tribute, and the B4000 was the Ford Ranger, and honestly the Mazda 3 was the Ford Focus. It shared most parts, and it shared a platform and all the things like that. Even the NC Miata had a Ford engine in it. And so they split in 2015, and since then Mazda has been pretty much on their own. And so this is a product of something completely Mazda. This is 100% a Mazda product. And I have to say, Mazda got on their feet pretty quick after splitting with Ford. This is a really solid car that doesn't rely on any other manufacturer. It's like Mazda stopped copying homework, but the grades don't change. Actually, I would say that these got better. I did review a 2010 Mazda 3, and while I liked it, I think it was pretty cheap. It was a pretty cheap vehicle. This doesn't feel cheap. This feels more expensive than it is, and I really, really like that. If I'm going to buy something, if I'm going to spend my hard-earned money on something, I want it to feel nice, and I want it to feel like I spent the right amount of money on it. And this is definitely that. I think this is just a really great bang for your buck. It's classy, it's nice, it's relaxing, and honestly, probably coming up in the next year or two, I'm going to need a new daily driver. This is at the top of my list. You can get them with a manual transmission. I don't know if I will, but by far, when I'm looking for a new car, this is the first one I will look at. This is the very first one I will look at, and hopefully the last one I'll have to look at. If you guys are at all interested, like I mentioned earlier, I did review a 2018 Mazda hatch. That had the radar cruise control. That was sort of spec'd out, as well as it had the larger 2.5 liter. So if you guys are interested in buying one of these, I'd highly recommend checking out that video as well, just so you can kind of get an idea of the differences in trims and all the different options you could find in this generation of Mazda 3. I really only have to review a manual transmission one, and then sort of got all my bases covered. But I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Huge thank you to Toyota of Naperville for letting me take out their Mazda 3. I love Mazdas. I know you guys love Mazdas. This is very much a Mazda channel. And so, of course, I had to drive one of these. I absolutely love Mazdas. And what better way to spend my morning than in a Mazda? So that is all thank you to Toyota Naperville. They are absolutely awesome. Definitely go check them out. Their website is up on the screen. Very friendly staff. They have a Supra in the showroom if you guys would like to go in and see it. You can walk around and do all that sort of things. It's black on black. I think it looks really cool. But I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Don't forget to rate the video, comment on the video, and subscribe if you really liked it. Take care, guys.
There goes a sight from my soul.